Today's session is all about lakehouses with Shabnam Watson. And as I said before, Shabnam is excellent and has really helped me understand fabric and lakehouses. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Shabnam to take us through lakehouses in fabric.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you, Sue, and everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Give me one moment, please. And let me get my Teams out of here so I can also see the chat window. All right. So, Sue, do you see my screen? We're all good?
Yep.
Okay.
All good.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Shabnam Watson. I'm an independent data consultant. I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP for 5 years. My areas of focus are with Power BI, before Power BI, analysis services, and most recently, Microsoft Fabric. I have a blog where I talk about various topics, Power BI, older posts about analysis services, and most recently Fabric. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. I would love to connect with you on any one of those. Today we're going to talk about Microsoft Fabric, specifically the Lakehouse part of it. So before we get started, I just wanted to point out a very nice website. That's the Fabric career website. I've actually bookmarked this for myself, and I use this to jump to everything else Microsoft these days. So if you want to jump to Microsoft Learn topics, this is a nice shortcut to have. And then if you're trying to learn about Microsoft Fabric in particular, this is an excellent resource to have. It starts with shortcuts to the Cloud Skills Challenges that are things that you can take so that you get a discount code. So if you're going to take a certification exam, make sure that you have a discount code. Don't pay full price. There's various discounts happening. The screenshot is from a few months ago, so if you take it now, it may be different. I've seen it go from 100% to 80% to 50% off discount. So make sure you take advantage of those discounts. And then from that site, there's a section where there's a Learn series that you can watch. These are the Learn series that some of the MVPs or Power users did together, where we walk through the Learn module. So it depends on your learning style. If you're the kind of person who likes to watch a video, this is for you. Otherwise, what's covered in the Learn modules also in the Learn website that you can read on your own. So it's totally up to you. So I did 3 of these with various people. And then the video that Sue was referring to that helped her, I recorded myself before I took the DP600 and after, so leading up to it a couple of days. And then obviously you cannot record during the session, but then I also right immediately, I recorded my experience, some gotchas. So if you plan to take that specifically remotely, not in person, it will give you some good tips. So check that out. All right, so to the topic of today, Microsoft Fabric. So hopefully by this point, everybody knows what it is. It's been out for more than a year in production, so out of preview. So Microsoft Fabric is an end-to-end analytics platform. The key point here is that it's a SaaS, it's a software as a service. That's the point that I would like to emphasize, because outside of Microsoft Fabric, a lot of the services that you can get, they already existed before. So you had Azure Synapse Analytics or Azure Databricks or Data Factory. So you had these other capabilities out there, but they were platform as a service, meaning that somebody had to provision them. Somebody had to go into the Azure portal, for example, create an instance, go through all the security. And then even at the end of that, there were all these disparate pieces where somebody had to connect them. So there was still a lot of plumbing that had to happen. So with Fabric, all of that is gone. Everything's in one place, one platform, one user interface. And you get capabilities such as warehousing, lake housing, data integration, and then real-time analytics. And of course, Power BI is a central part of it. So the software as a service is a huge and powerful enabler for organizations to focus on what matters, which is more of the front side dealing with the data, getting results out versus the back end plumbing. So Microsoft Fabric has kind of inherited Power BI's interface. So for those of you who have used Power BI, it has a similar interface. Power BI, not much about it has changed, except for one very powerful storage mode that we're going to talk about. But otherwise, you go to the Fabric portal or Power BI portal, it's the same thing, except that now, right next to Power BI, you have access to these other capabilities. Unless your tenant admin has limited you, you should have access to these other capabilities. So here's one of the Microsoft slides that was given to me by one of the Microsoft staff during a shared presentation. So this shows you what's available in Microsoft Fabric, all the way from the left, which is the data factory. This data factory provides a very similar experience to Azure Data Factory or the pipelines in Azure Synapse Analytics. However, going forward, it's going to have a lot more features. So once it reaches feature parity, going forward, it's going to get more features than the other products that are now older products. So Microsoft is going to support them. However, any new features are going to come to the data factory in Microsoft Fabric. And it's the same for the other products as well. And then you have the blue set of icons, and those are the Synapse family of products. So those are the ones that give you the Spark notebooks, the Synapse warehouse, the Lakehouse, real-time analytics. And then we have Power BI, which I think most of you are familiar with. And then a data activator is to take actions based on data. So all of this together, a couple of key points is that you have the same security model, you have the same governance, you have one point where you're defining security, it's the same model, so that helps a lot. And then all of these capabilities are either AI enabled or they are going to be AI enabled. So you have AI running through all of them. And then at the foundation, you have OneLake. So OneLake is the storage, the SaaS version of Azure Data Lake Storage account that is shared across all of these services. So you can use any of these services to write to OneLake, any other one can pick it up. And then, of course, you have Purview for the governance. Purview's outside of my realm, so I can't speak to that much. So this is Microsoft Fabric in a nutshell. As far as real quick touching on pricing and capacities, although pricing changes, so take this with a grain of salt. Make sure you check the latest Microsoft documentation for the latest on pricing. But this is my understanding is that you can get access to a Fabric trial capacity for 60 days, although that 60 days for a lot of people, it has been reset. And then the way the pricing works is that you get access to a capacity. So you pay for a capacity. If you're familiar with Power BI capacities, these are the same model. And once you have those capacities, you can throw in as many workloads as you want to them. So you can have one capacity and you have one Power BI model in it, or you can have 100 Power BI models and a warehouse and a lakehouse. So that's how it works. You pay for the capacities. P capacities are the older ones, are the ones that came with Power BI. The F capacities are the newer ones that are Fabric capacities. Going forward, the P, you will not be able to purchase P capacities. I think actually you may not be able to purchase them now anymore. You have to go with the F capacities. But basically, the big difference between them, if you still have the P ones, is that P ones you could not pause them, but with F you could. So even after your trial runs out, you can purchase an F capacity and you can run it for a few minutes, do your testing, pause it, and then you won't get charged for it. Okay, so the building block in Fabric, the building foundation is the workspace. So you have a workspace. A workspace can contain items. It can have one workspace. You can have Power BI reports and a warehouse and a Power BI semantic model, previously known as data sets. And you can have pipelines and data flows that bring in the data. And then you can have another workspace that has a lakehouse and pipelines and data flows to bring in data. Now, each workspace has its own storage area that's specific to that workspace. Now, so what's one lake? One lake is the sum of all these storages across all of these workspaces together. So that's one lake. The reason I share this example is that for me, it took a while to figure out, so what is one lake? Where is it? Where can I see it? So one lake is the SaaS version, software as a service version. For ADLS, it's the sum of the storage area for all of the workspaces. Okay, so talking about security a little bit, I mentioned that Fabric has adopted a security that's similar to Power BI. So everything starts with a workspace. It's a hierarchical security model. So the first step is, the first layer is, can someone have access to this workspace or not? And then in the workspace, there's different layers of access. So you can have workspace admin or member and others. And then if you share workspace with somebody with not a member or admin or contributor permission, if you share a workspace with them as a viewer, then you can limit their access further, so they can be subject to further limitations on what they can see. So they can only see certain items, or when it comes to the one lake, they can only see certain folders. But again, this is at the very high level. I'm not going to get into this anymore than this. So as far as the workspace collaboration goes, though, the workspace itself, the roles are exactly like Power BI. So depending on, admin can do everything, member can do everything except add other admins. So this is very similar to what you had with Power BI before Fabric. All right. So one of the key points for Microsoft Fabric is specifically for Power BI. So before Fabric, we used to have two storage modes, and actually going forward, we still have these two storage modes, but now we have a third one. So with the import mode, you would move all the data from your backend into your model and into Vertipack engine, which is Power BI's memory. This would give you the fastest performance. However, you were moving the data. Some people would say you're duplicating the data. Some people didn't like that. And then you would have to wait for the data to move. So if you're dealing with a couple of million rows, it's not a big deal. But if you get to 100+ million records or larger, then that refresh time can be significant. The pro was that queries run the fastest, and to this day, the queries in import mode run the fastest. On the other hand, we have direct query. Direct query is when you're not actually moving the data. Power BI just serves as a semantic model, so you are just defining the relationships between the tables. That way, Power BI knows how to create queries and send them to the backend, for example, your SQL database. So the pro is that you're not actually moving the data. There's no refresh time. You don't have to worry about data fitting in your Power BI services, capacities, memory limits. You don't have to worry about that anymore. However, the downside is that, again, when you're working with larger data sets, those queries going back to SQL Server may be slow. Most likely, they're going to be slow. So with Fabric, you have these storage modes still. So we have them still. We have import and we have direct query. However, now we have a third one that's called direct lake or see-through. With direct lake, you're getting the best of both worlds. And really, you are getting the best of both worlds. I know a lot of times when people say that is not true, but here I find it to be amazing. It's very, very close to the best of both worlds. So you're getting the performance of import without waiting for that refresh time, without moving the data, with near real time of direct query. And the way this works is because I'm going to go into details a little bit later about this, but Power BI can now directly work with those files in the OneLake. So if you look at this diagram, both the import and direct query, they go through a SQL layer, whether they're moving the data or they're translating the queries to SQL. But at the bottom row, if you look at that, it's actually skipping that level. So that SQL layer of translating does not exist anymore. So Power BI thinks that those files in the lake are its own internal storage. And that's why it's super fast. Okay.
I've never
So
heard it explained that way, that it actually sees it as part of its internal storage. That
yes,
makes a lot of sense now.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So Power BI is Direct Lake is import on demand. So it's its own storage. So that's why it's super fast. And that's where the magic is.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so now let's talk about the Lakehouse. Let's talk a little bit about the Lakehouse. So in Microsoft Fabric, at the foundation, we have the One Lake storage. In One Lake, everything's stored in Delta format. I'm going to talk about it in a little bit. And then you have several tools or products or services that can access that One Lake. The one that we're going to focus on today is the Lakehouse that uses Spark to get to the One Lake storage. Now, if you're going with you want to use T-SQL, you can go through the warehouse experience. Now, the Lakehouse itself also has a mini warehouse in it that's read-only. So even when you create a Lakehouse, you are working with a mini warehouse that helps you work with SQL, but the SQL is read-only. When we are in the Lakehouse world, SQL is read-only. Spark is in full control of reads and writes. So this is the column that we're going to focus on today. Okay, so a lakehouse is basically the combination of the storage from one lake plus the Spark engine that comes with the Synapse part of the Microsoft Fabric. So we are getting the Synapse Spark plus the One Lake together, and that gives us the Lakehouse. So Lakehouse is we have a bunch of files in there, but we don't want to work with files. It took us years to go into databases and work with tables, so nobody wants to work with files anymore. So now we have a Lakehouse that puts a layer that looks like tables in front of the files so that we can query them with SQL and other languages easily. Okay, so every time you go into Microsoft Fabric, into a workspace, and you say, I want a lakehouse. So you say, click, create a lakehouse. It creates two other items for you also, whether you want it or not. You get a lakehouse plus you get a default Power BI semantic model that its storage mode is in, guess what storage? It's going to be Direct Lake, of course. And then you also get a SQL Analytics endpoint that's read-only. That SQL Analytics endpoint is actually the warehouse. It's a mini warehouse, but it's read-only. That is what helps you write SQL queries to it. And if you build a Power BI model that you want to import from, or you want it to be in direct query, those have to go through that SQL layer, because import and direct query, they need SQL translation in between. Okay, and with the default Power BI semantic model, it's great, but it has some limitations. You can also create your own custom semantic models that are in Direct Lake. However, you have to use a web interface at this time. In future, they may change that so that hopefully we can use Power BI Desktop as well. But right now, you have to use the service. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about the warehouse real quick also. With the warehouse also, when you create a warehouse, you get this default Power BI semantic model, which is in Direct Lake. You also get that custom one. You can create custom ones also. And so we talked about this one more time, just a quick review. So pre-Fabric, we had import and direct query. And then post-Fabric, we have the Direct Lake in addition to the other storage modes. And one of the things that's important here is that anytime you use a Fabric engine to write data, so let's say you say, I want to create a pipeline and I want to bring data from Azure SQL database and I want to write it to my workspace in the Lakehouse as a table. What happens is that it writes the data in the open standard format, Delta Parquet, that Power BI can use, but also it writes it in a certain order called V order. That is what Power BI really likes. So V order, V stands in Vertipack engine, which is Power BI's in-memory engine. So that order that you feed data to the engine is important for performance, for your query performance, for the compression that it can achieve. So that's why that if you bring your data, you put it in one lake with VOrder versus you're accessing your data in an ADLS account that you use a different tool to write the data with. It's not part of Fabric. You can still use Direct Lake, but it will not have the same performance. It will have a slightly worse performance.
Okay. Question, and I think
Yes.
quick question, well, two. We can still use desktop to create a semantic model if we connect to the Lakehouse, can't we? And I've just had a look on the get data and it's got Lakehouses there.
Yes, you can. Yeah. So you would connect to the SQL endpoint of the Lakehouse, and that to Power BI desktop is going to look like a SQL database. For import and direct query, you have to go through the SQL endpoint.
Okay. Perfect.
It's the Direct Lake one that you cannot do from Power BI desktop yet.
Okay. And then another question, V ordering, is that equal to vector ordering? Or
it's Vertipack.
Vertipack.
V stands for Vertipack. Vertipack is Power BI and Analysis Services storage engine. Yeah. It was called Vertipack. And Analysis Services is really what runs Power BI. You see it when you go to connect to Power BI models from Management Studio or from Tabular Editor or DAX Studio. You're going to see that the type of the connection you choose, it's Analysis Services. And that's how you can tell that it's Analysis Services. But so actually, that's a good point. Microsoft with Power BI, they went to a software as a service model with Analysis Services. So you've always been using Analysis Services in the back end. You just didn't know it. And that was a powerful move for everybody to be able to get up run with the reports and models really, really fast to become very productive, very, very fast. So they've done the same thing with these other tools that they saw the success of Power BI and they followed suit. So now you have Data Factory and you have Synapse and then some other things as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, so this is what a lakehouse looks like. So in in Fabric, I'm showing the workspace, and in this workspace, you create a lakehouse. You get a Lakehouse Explorer. It shows you your tables and your files. So any file that you save in the tables section of the Lakehouse, they show up in the table browser. They have a little triangle next to them. It just means that they're Delta tables. And then in the file section, you can load whatever you want. You can load CSV files and everything else. The table section is the manage section. So that's the part that the Power BI the default Power BI semantic model is going to pick up tables from automatically, unless if you change a setting. And then when you have things in the Lakehouse Explorer, from here you can query them. I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes. All right, and then the Power BI semantic model, so the default Power BI semantic model that comes with every lakehouse or warehouse, you cannot delete it, it just exists there. You can create measures, you can decide what things are hidden, you can remove certain tables, you can exclude some tables from the default Power BI model, and the modeling part for it, it's in the SQL endpoints model tab. So if you see on this, if you see here, let me see if I can highlight here. So if you actually wonder where do I define the model relationships, it's under the SQL endpoint of a Lakehouse. If you go to the model tab, that's where it is defined because you don't have Power BI desktop anymore. Okay, so a couple of notes about Parquet and Delta, because not everybody is familiar with Parquet and Delta files. So we're going to take a detour into the lake and talk about Delta and Parquet files. So Parquet is the founding block for Delta. So we're going to talk about Parquet first. Parquet is open source. It's column-based storage, so it compresses data column by column. It's not a row store like what you have in SQL tables. It's similar to clustered column store index if you're coming from a SQL background. It compresses tremendously and it's really good at decompressing the data when you query it. It's ideal for analytical queries because analytical queries, we are saying, give me a distinct list of states and amount of sales amount. So you're not asking for select star from all rows and columns. So that is the benefit of Parquet. And Parquet is open source, so you can, with Parquet, I see a question, you cannot double click on a Parquet file like a text file or CSV and see the content. You need to use tools that can open Parquet, and there is several of them out there. So you can use Azure Synapse Analytics, you can use Databricks, there's tons of tools that you can see the Parquet, one of which is Fabric. So you can use Fabric, any of the engines in Fabric, they can all show you what's inside of it. So this is what it looks like. So you save data for, let's say, New York taxi data. This is an open data source that's out there. This is what it looks like. So if you just say save the New York taxi, you're going to get one folder and it by default splits into a bunch of files, and it has an algorithm that does that. So unless if you tell it to split the data a certain way, it creates a bunch of files and they all go together. So this is what a Parquet file looks like. I'm going to show the Delta to you in a second, and I just want to point out the difference. So the benefit of Parquet is that it's column by column. If we go back to the row-based story, so let's say that we're storing this data in a SQL table. Again, not cluster column store index, it's just a table with nothing else. It's heap. So if you are after certain data in this table, you have to scan everything. So let's say that we're after a query that we want to get the products and countries from the sales table where product is not socks. So in order to do that, we have to scan all of these rows, whether we want them or not, because that's how data is stored. When we talk about the column-based storage, the benefit is that data is stored column by column, so it's not row by row. So each column is stored separately. So if we are going after the same data from the get-go, we can say, oh, I only need to look at column 1 and column 3. The others I don't have to worry about. And then also within each column, data is sorted into what's called row groups. So we can use the row groups also. In our case, we said we want to see everything other than socks. So we know that we don't want row group 2. So that also gets eliminated. So if you look at our query, the select part gets rid of the extra columns, and our where clause gets rid of the extra rows. So we can focus on the parts that we exactly need. And this is a part of the reason that querying with analytical type of queries, Parquet is way faster than a row store. Okay. And then, so what does Delta do? Delta is Parquet plus some additional capabilities. So Parquet is not updatable. You cannot say, I want something deleted or updated. So Parquet is read-only. So what Delta does is that it adds deletions and additions on top of it. The way it does it is that there's a transaction log that takes that logs all the changes. And then with that, you get time travel because it's recording what files have been added and deleted. You can always say, show me the data as of, and you can get time travel. Okay. So the same data, the New York taxi data, if you look at it in the Delta format when it's saved, it's still all those Parquet files, but now you have a Delta log folder. And this is a way that you can look at a folder and immediately tell whether it's Delta or Parquet, is by the presence of this Delta log folder. Okay, and if you look into the Delta log, you're going to see there's a bunch of JSON files that the JSON files keep track of which one of the Parquet files are active on that certain day. And then you can also run a command. This is a Spark SQL command that I'm showing you in a Spark notebook that gives you the history. Okay. All right, so all of the engines, Fabric engines, write the data automatically in Delta with the view order, which is optimized for Vertiback engines. This is one of the key points of performance. That's why I'm emphasizing this. So I'm going to skip through this one because we talked about it before. And one thing about the Direct Lake's magic. So now that we talked about Parquet, so Parquet is very similar to Power BI's import storage mode in Vertback. So right now, if you do import, it moves the data into Power BI's proprietary engine in Vertback engine. It's Power BI's proprietary format. If you pick that file, you cannot open it with anything else other than Power BI. But it's very similar to Parquet. So what happens with Direct Lake is that instead of using its own proprietary storage format, now it reads these Delta Parquet files directly. And it initially, when you publish a model, the model is empty. There's nothing's in memory. And then as queries come in, data is loaded into memory on demand. Okay.
I have some questions, if it's a good point to ask you some question. So Anthony asked, because you can store videos and images in one lake, can you reference them in Power BI, or do you need to host them somewhere else using a URL, the URL maybe or the file link? I've
Ooh,
not
I don't,
seen that.
that's a
That's a
good
good,
question. I don't
yeah.
know.
Do you know
That's
what
a
we
really
should do,
interesting question.
Shabnam? We're going to ask him to test it because I know he's got access to One Lake and I know he's got Power BI. So we're going to ping it
Mhm.
back to him and say, test it, Anthony, and tell us because
So Power BI can read the files. Remember, they have to be in a Delta format, Delta or Parquet format, and they have to be in the tables section of the Lakehouse. So it is true that you can store any kind of file in there, but Power BI will not be able to query it. Like directly, like from going to with the direct lake or through the
yeah.
SQL endpoint. So
Because sometimes you can pull in imaging, can't? We'll have
yeah,
to test that, Anthony. I don't see why you can't because you can pull it in from OneDrive without it being connected to the model. But he said he's got thumbs up. He'll check it out for us. That's
yeah,
brilliant.
okay, awesome,
And
awesome.
then Oliver asked, is the Synapse warehouse also column-based?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. So um, they all use the Delta format for their storage.
Okay, brilliant. And then another one was people are liking your approach to explain the basics. So it's going in and they're
Okay.
understanding it. So there's lots of thoughts. So that's that. And then another one was, did you say there's a command historic? And I think so Nico was asking, and Darren said it was describe historic file name. So
Yeah, so let me go back, and I think I have this in one of the
to read Parquet
queries
files
as
to
well.
pick up.
Yes, so you can say describe history, and this will
Yeah.
give you all of the versions that it has. And then there is a command I'll show you. I may have a sample of it to show you. So basically, when you are querying it, you can tell it that you want to see data as of a certain date or as of a certain version if you know the version number.
Yeah.
And they actually recently added that also to the warehouse. So with SQL now,
Okay.
you can also do that.
Describe history. And Oliver said he thinks time travel's limited to 7 days at the moment.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. See,
Um,
they're all
the
chatting away and listening to you.
Yes. So the thing with the time travel, since we're talking about it, so the versions is great as long as you have a need for it, because the extra versions they're adding to your total data. So if you don't
Yeah.
want last year's data,
Mm.
if you just delete in Delta, it doesn't actually go away. It keeps the files and it marks them as inactive. So the data actually exists. Uh,
Oh,
so at some point, you got to go and clean the data that you don't need
yeah.
anymore so you don't
Yeah.
build up. Yes.
Yeah.
So automatically it's 7 days. I think there might be a way to set it beyond 7 days,
Yeah.
but then again, you have to think about whether you actually need it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm going to do, because we have about 20 minutes left, I'm going to switch to demo and demo a few things. Okay. So this is the Microsoft Fabrics landing page. So we have all of these experiences. Just real quick, the experiences don't really limit you to one kind of workload. The experiences are only here to give you shortcuts. So they just change your menu options. That's it. Otherwise, everything's together next to each other. So I'm going to go to the Power BI. It doesn't matter whether you go to Power BI or any one of them. Um, all I wanted to do right now was to get to my workspaces. I just wanted to bring this menu up. I could have done with any other one as well. So I'm going to say new workspace, and I'm going to call this test 3. So I create a workspace. And I'm going to say create. And now I can create any one of these items. So I can create a lake house. Even though notice in the bottom corner here, I am in the Power BI experience. So I can create any other item that I want as well. So I'm going to say create a lake house, and we're going to call this L4. And this creates an empty lake house for me. It doesn't really have anything in it, but as soon as it creates the lake house, if you notice up here, it says a SQL Analytics endpoint for SQL querying and a default semantic power model for reporting are being created. So the moment you create a lakehouse, you get those two other items. And this is what it just prompted me on the top right. And now that you have a lakehouse, you can bring in data into it. One of the easiest ways is to just manually go here and say upload. You can upload files and folders. You can create shortcuts to other other Fabric locations or other Amazon S3 and other locations. A shortcut doesn't actually move the data, but it lets you query it as if this were local to you. And then you have the pipelines and data flows. So, oh, looks like I've hit a limit of how many items I can have open. So let me close some of these guys here. There we go. So a pipeline is the way where you what you use to orchestrate your data movement. So the pipeline creates a canvas. You can put different transformations on it, different steps to bring the data, to enrich it, to send an email out to somebody, let them know that it's done. Refresh a Power BI model if it's in import. So you can do all those activities. So there are a lot of data sources available that you can pull data from. In this case, I'm just going to click on sample data and bring in the public holidays data set. And then when I bring in data, I can decide whether I want it to go into the files section or to the tables section. Now remember, the tables section gets automatically exposed to my Power BI semantic model. So if this is, let's say, a production maybe workspace, one approach would be when you're landing the data, put it in the file section first, and then pick it up from the file section, enrich it in the right format, put it into the table section. So I'm going to click on next, and then I'm going to say send it to the table section, create a new table, and I get a chance to do some minor definitions here. So I'm going to click on next. And save and run. So this creates a sample pipeline that I just wanted to show you. So this is the pipeline. You get to put any of these activities. You can copy the data. You can run a notebook, run a SQL stored procedure, call another notebook, send emails, interact with Teams, or even call Azure Databricks notebooks. Or you can also refresh a Power BI semantic model. And so this is our pipeline. So it has a source and destination. Again, if you have used Azure Synapse Pipelines or Data Factory, this is very similar feel and look. And then when this is all done, so I'm going to go back to Lakehouse 4 and refresh my tables, and hopefully the table is here. So it's loading a preview. So right now I am in the Lakehouse. So you see, I get the list of columns. I can say, there we go. So I can say from here, I can view the file. So you see that I copied it and it ended up in a Delta format. And then if I go to the maintenance, this is where I can set some settings, and this is where I can say that after a certain number of days, run the vacuum and get rid of the older files. Let me see. And then properties gives me all of the path that I need. And then so we are in the lake house. So this part was confusing to me for a while, but you can't just say query. There's no option that says query this table that we just created. So instead, you go to the SQL Analytics endpoint because that's what gives you the SQL capabilities. So now we are in the SQL Analytics endpoint, and from here, I can write queries. I can say new SQL query, select top 100 from it, and there you go. I got my queries. So this is a really, really quick introduction to the SQL, I guess, analytic endpoints of the Lakehouse. Now, the interesting thing is that if I go to the Model tab, you're going to see that there is an all tables section, and this has changed from when it was originally released. There's a bunch of tables here. There's the first couple that you see, the first four these are built-in DMVs. They're views for long-running queries and statistics. And then all the way on the right-hand side is our processed table. Is really the dates table. I wasn't paying attention. We picked a bad name. But if I go to the default semantic model, there's nothing in it. So this is something that you can control. You can say, I want to click on a table and say add it to the default semantic model, or there's a setting that you can say, whenever I add a table to the table section, I want it to automatically show up. So this all depends on your use case and what you want to do. And then also another setting.
I've got a quick question.
Sure.
So the table definition, is it a persisted table or is it still a table referencing the Parquet files?
It is based off of the Parquet files. It's the same. It doesn't have its own storage. Its storage is the Parquet files.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, because if you go into the data, if I go into the, it's not letting me, so just let me go back to.
Sorry for interrupting, but it was sort of specific at that point, so I thought I would ask at that.
No, good question. So see, this is the tables section. If I look at the files, this is the file that we brought over. And because it's in a Delta format, it automatically shows up as a table for me under the SQL Analytics endpoint. So this is the same. It's not an additional copy. Yes. It's not it's persisted as in the terms that we brought in the file, we brought in public holidays from the remote store. That's the Microsoft sample data set, and I brought it into this workspace and I saved it in a Delta format. The moment I do that in the tables folder of my Lakehouse, it surfaces as a table that I can query now with SQL.
Okay, but you got a thumbs up. You got 2 thumbs up from Nico saying thank you.
Okay. And then so the moment it's in the table section now, it can automatically show up in my Power BI, the default semantic model as well. So notice that I haven't refreshed anything, I haven't done anything. And now I can go and say new report. And now I can create a report. And I didn't actually do anything, but now I can I can access the data that was in the Delta file. So obviously we didn't really do much with the model. I didn't create any measures, but the point is you did not see me create a model and say import the data into Power BI. So that's one of the great things about Microsoft Fabric is this new Power BI Direct Lake Storage mode. So if I switch from this workspace to a different workspace that I have a bigger data set or model in it, then you can see the difference a little bit better. So here I have loaded the this lake house called Alatoona. Alatoona is a lake that's close to that's in my state. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, United States. So that's where the name comes from. And in here, I have loaded some information about the drugs and the years that they were provided and the providers who prescribed them. So this is public information that's available. So this data is loaded in this Lakehouse. So first it was landed into the file section, and you can see that these are about 3 gigabytes each. So it's for several years. So that's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So about 9, about 30 gigs worth of data is here. That has been loaded into this table, the drug cost table. It has been loaded using the notebooks. I did not show you the notebooks because we didn't have enough time. But if I query this data, so if I go back and I'll show you, I have 2 Power BI reports here. I've created 2 Power BI reports. So this one is off of the import model. So I've loaded that data, 30 gigs worth of data, 224 million records into an import model versus, stop this one. So this is a Power BI desktop report that's live connecting to the model. So these are both live connecting. Okay, so these are just report only. Live connect to the import mode and live connect to the direct lake, the custom model. It's not the one that comes with it. It has a couple more measures added to it. So you're going to see that when I refresh these two, we should get a we should get a performance very close to each other. Now this direct lake mode, I have not touched this for about an hour. So anything that you don't use after a while gets kicked out of memory. So nothing should be in memory for this one at this point either. So I'm going to turn on the performance analyzer and start recording. So first, this is our import model, right? So I'm going to say refresh. So we are just refreshing the visuals, which will submit queries to the import model. And then, oops, looks like I have been kicked out of my, just 1 second. So let's see.
While you're doing that, I hadn't made the connection between using Direct Lake. I was just doing it in Fabric, and I hadn't thought I'm using Direct Lake. It's just by seeing you explaining it that way, you think, well, of course it's Direct Lake, but I hadn't thought about it in that way. So it's actually using it whilst without realizing it. I hadn't even realized I was using it.
Even better, right?
I know. I was watching
That's
it go,
even better.
Sounds brilliant. And then of course you're using it while you're using Power BI in the service against Fabric.
Yeah.
It's building your report.
Looks like I have lost my connection here to this one, but let's see. It threw our test off a little bit because now it's logging me in. So let me do this. Let me try to see if I can show this from the service. All right, so we're going to do this from the service. So I'm going to go into the Power BI reports folder. I have one that this is the import one. So let's go to that one first. Okay, so this is based off of an imported one. I'm just going to test how responsive it is. Okay, and then I'm going to go into edit and throw in something else here. So I'm going to bring this here, bring a chart, and put the year and a measure. So we're going to put the row count. Okay, so you see how responsive that is because that's import, that's expected. But if I go back here, don't save. So we're going to go to the one that's in Direct Lake. So this one is it's connecting to a Direct Lake model. So now, because I haven't touched this for about an hour, nothing's in memory. So this is accessing those files like on the fly. So we see that this took a couple of seconds to load, but think about this. To import all that data, it took 1 hour of refresh time. So for your first query, you have to wait a couple of seconds. But in exchange for that, you don't have that 1 hour refresh time anymore. So that's the beauty of this. And then after that point, this is going to be as responsive as the other one. So that is pretty much what I call the magic of Direct Lake. And I know we're towards the end, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'm going to stop here for maybe just one last question. Otherwise, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll just put the turn the speech in. That was brilliant. I didn't even realize I was let me just allow mic and everything.
Yeah, if you have a lake house and you put tables in there, you say create a report. You are using the Direct Lake. That's the beauty of it.
That was absolutely, Fernando's making me laugh. He's putting a little gif of someone doing yoga.
Yeah, I see that.
He's cheeky, isn't he? That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. Any questions from anyone? Feel free to unmute and ask questions or say thank you. Or there's been lots of chat throughout. Oliver said, using a direct lake connection will presumably use capacity a lot quicker.
So I think the refreshes, the Power BI refreshes, they also have an impact on the capacity. So you have to see. So, and it's not just one model. People in an organization sometimes have hundreds of models and they're all importing, let's say, dim date. So you're eliminating all of that activity from your capacity load. Instead, you're getting on-demand hits on that, loading that table. So typically the imports are pretty taxing on the capacities as well.
Yeah, it's not as quite as straightforward, is it? Once you start really thinking about things. Yeah, Oliver said, yeah.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions, last questions before I say thank you to Takimi saying it's great she's learned about Fabric. She's also now found she needs to study SQL. We had Brian de Bonk on last week talking about real-time intelligence, and we were talking about SQL then, and languages to learn. And the session before, we had Kane on from Australia, who was showing us how to pause and restart Fabric capacities using a logic time app. So we've had 3 weeks of Fabric, which has been brilliant, but sort of focusing on the Lakehouse and how it sort of underwrites everything has been really good. So Shabnam, thank you so much. There were so many positive comments about your ability
Thank you so much.
to explain really difficult technical concepts very simply and easy to understand. So if you reach out to Shabnam, she's on, you're very welcome, everyone. If you reach out to Shabnam, she's on LinkedIn, and you can find her. If you want to put your website or your blog in, then I honestly found the resources so incredibly helpful for understanding what Fabric was and for achieving my DP600. And as you said, that right at the very start, that Fabric landing page, the career page, is such a useful resource. And Microsoft Learn content is just brilliant, isn't it? You can really, it sort of, I think, hits many of the different learning styles.
Yes.
So
2 quick questions.
Yes.
You said there was a 60-day free license. Is that correct?
Yeah. Sorry, go
Yes.
on, Shabnam.
You can activate you can activate a 60-day trial of Microsoft Fabric. So once you create a workspace and then you try to create any of the Fabric items, it will prompt you for you to start a trial for 60 days.
Do you think that's enough time for a person with a full-time job to get a good feel for Fabric?
That's a good start. That's at least a good
Good
start.
start. Okay.
Yes. What I have seen in the past is that the 60-day has been reset quite a few times so far. So I don't know whether going forward or not they're going to do that, but you may find it that it's going to last you longer than 60 days.
But Darren, if we had Kane on last week who showed us how to pause and restart a
You can also
capacity.
exactly.
Yeah. And so you can get an F2. And Christina was on as well talking to us about using Fabric and setting up capacities. So, my initial thought at the beginning was, no, I'm not going to be using Fabric because it's so expensive. But I think there is, I think you can set it up and pause it and restart it to learn. If after the 60 days you're still interested, but the 60 days does give you a good insight into actually playing with it. I managed to play with it with working as well, but it's finding something you want to do. I think that's the thing. I got the place at SQL Bits to present Python and Fabric, so that really motivated me to learn it.
Sure.
Yeah. No, pausing is only if you buy capacity, Oliver. It doesn't pause your trial. So I don't know how long they're going to keep renewing it. They've been renewing it for the past year, haven't they? So
Yeah, mine hasn't stopped yet.
Yeah, no, mine hasn't stopped yet. I suspect it will do at some point, but I think now's the time to try.
I think it will. I think they will stop it, but I think the case is those that there's still so much that they need to do to Fabric to kind of make it. I suspect there's still some key things that aren't there yet that people are kind of going, well, we need those. So maybe they're just trying to actually, it's also, I suppose, at the end of the day, it's a good marketing. If they keep it going, they get more and more people onto it.
Yuvi's just put in an interesting point saying his colleague got a 30-day trial now. So, I'm not sure. I think mine's been renewed for 30 days. It was renewed for 60, and then it was renewed for 30. So I guess it's one of those things that if you can, I didn't think I would have much use for it because my businesses are smaller, but I am actually looking at running it in production with one of my companies using an F2 pause and resume. Mm-hmm. So I think, and we're expecting it to be not hugely expensive.
There's one more thing that I don't know if you are aware of, but I put that in the chat. It's a developer program. It's a Microsoft 365 developer program. When you go through that, they will give you access to a sandbox environment that comes with maybe, I think it's 10 user accounts, and they already have they already have Office licenses, they have Power BI Pro licenses, and then in that you can of course enable Fabric, but that is a really good environment to have. I put the link to it for you in the chat, so definitely Brilliant. Explore that.
They've stopped that now.
Mine is still going. Maybe
it depends on. Yeah, they stopped that earlier on this year for new people coming on. That even on the developer one, you can't even just get a straight developer go through that developer route with on Microsoft license. You have to have like Visual Studio before you can even get onto that. They've closed down that option quite a lot for just general users.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I was trying because I tried about a month ago or so, and I just blocked me, wouldn't let me do it.
Okay.
I couldn't even log into the developer edition, even though I had a username that I'd set up. Wouldn't even let me in.
Okay. Maybe reach out to customer services and ask them if there's enough people they might do. Tell her Sue.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Oh, it was brilliant, wasn't it? Thank you. Thank you so
everyone.
much, Shabnam, and thank you.
Right.
Next week, we've got Anthony teaching us all about dynamic. He's looking shocked. Yeah, it is the end of August.
Oh,
hopefully you're ready, Anthony.
Yeah, finished it. It's ready.
You need to send me the link so I can put it up.
Yeah.
So next week, we've got Anthony going through dynamic field parameters for us. So we'll be going... No?
Dynamic formatting. So
dynamic formatting. Send me through the form and then I'll know.
I will.
Take care,
anyway,
folks.
Take care, everyone. Have a fabulous rest of the week. And thank you so much, Shabnam. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
I'll keep in touch and see you in Stockholm.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Bye, everyone.
No problem. Bye.
Cheers all.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
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 Bye.